not winning 90% of your new business because you have some sort of incredible value.
I'm going to take a bit of a different angle.
I've got a budget this big. I'm going to give it to you because you have a really killer plan.
You give a Red Bull to a turtle, what do you expect?
I think that's a dead turtle. So let's move on to...
Rick.
Cheers.
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 Does your current premium finance company lock you into long-term agreements? That's because they don't want you talking to us. At IFS, we win your business the good old-fashioned way, with customer service. I know you don't always have to use a premium finance company, but when you do, you should use IFS. Cheers.
Hi there, and welcome to a very special episode of the Digital Insurance Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Reed, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Jeff Roy, CEO of Excalibur Insurance, Steve Earle, CEO of Cheap Insurance, and Adam Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell & Whale. And today we are joined by two special guests, Colin and Steve from the IBAO, who are going to help us dive into the Going Paperless project and what it means for brokers. I just wanted to say a big thank you to IFS Premium Finance, our premier sponsor, as well as the Crew Group, and of course, Garrison's Brewery. Thanks very much, guys. Without you, this is not possible. So Colin is obviously the CEO of the Insurance Brokers Association of Ontario. Steve, do you want to do a quick intro of yourself?
Sure. I'm a partner with Three Tree. I provide solutions focused in the insurance space in Canada and helping the IBAO facilitate their Going Paperless initiative here nationally with all the stakeholders.
Awesome. So we've been talking about going paperless, like everyone knows what we're talking about. So I'm going to throw it over to Colin and or Steve to give our listeners their perspective on what this project is. So
yeah, I can start off. So the IBO has a 3-year strategic plan, and included in that plan was originally to look at consumer data and what we need to do to access that data and make sure that we can communicate it effectively across the industry. And as we moved into the pandemic, it became pretty evident, because everybody had to quickly pivot to work from home, that we needed to start thinking a little bit further ahead. Some of the insurance companies started to move into going paperless pretty quickly. So we created the project to look at going paperless. It became a national issue. But as ever, the IBO stepped in. We have quite a large broker base, obviously, compared with the other provinces. And it's easy for us to include additional areas of the country in a lot of what we do. So we started to pick up the pieces and started to move forward on going paperless. It started off with some initial discussions with the initial front movers out in the marketplace, and it expanded accordingly. One of the main drivers, obviously, is to give consumers choice. It's all based on consumer preferences, and it was really trying to assist the industry in order to facilitate that as a group. Now, as you are very aware, the industry all moves at different paces at different times, and it's really just a coordination exercise of what we had to look at. So originally, we set out to try and figure out how to help the brokers understand what they needed to do, but it very quickly started to expand in helping the insurance companies to figure out what they had to do to help the brokers. So we had some quick wins that we looked at. We had some issues that were raised as a group, and we had a relatively short time frame to start looking at solutions, which is we pitched it at probably about 12 or 18 months, and the project's due to conclude probably about March of this year.
thanks, Colin. So maybe paint the picture for our audience here. You talk about standards for documents. Like most brokers are used to getting a deck page or a billing statement or what have you in the mail, and it's pretty obvious when a human broker looks at it what's a billing statement and what's a deck page and a pink slip and so on. Why do you need standards when you're going digital?
Well, you need to be able to figure out where all these documents are within the data, so that you can ensure that when a consumer, going to the basic form, when a consumer goes to look for the document, they actually find the document they're looking for. And behind that is really, how do you get the document to move through the various tiers of the supply chain effectively and efficiently? So that's kind of where the standards really play a key important role. But it's not just the standards, it's how you actually use and interpret them.
So you're coming towards the end of the third phase, the final phase of the project here. And obviously this is going to go live, like you said, in different times with different carriers and different vendors. Why do you think brokers need to pay attention to this now? Like, you're just starting into a fairly extensive communications plan, obviously to make brokers aware of what's going on. Why is it something important to brokers that they need to pay attention to?
As we move forward in our society, consumers start to demand better and more effective servicing. And also it puts pressure on the business models themselves to try and reduce costs and become more efficient in the way you can actually transact business. Consumers are going to start to demand to be able to do transactions themselves electronically. Are we there yet? Not entirely. And, the consumer survey that we've undertaken would indicate that's the case, that we're not there yet, but there's great opportunities there. Clearly, as we moved into the pandemic, many of the insurance companies had to look at the way they were doing things. A lot of, physical effort in an insurance company is around paper, the printing, the packaging, the posting. So as you start to look at any kind of business model that you're trying to streamline on a digital platform, like we had to when everybody started to work from home, you look at the low-hanging fruit, and, going paperless was one of them. So it's really, how do we do that? The insurance companies themselves all have different strategies on how to do this. Some have tools already that they were trying to leverage, and some didn't. In Ontario alone, there's over 100 companies that serve as brokers. So that's 100 different ways to do things, which could just turn into a nightmare. So, as part of our efforts in the industry, it's easier for an association like ours to try and get parties around the table to discuss efficiencies than it is for competitors to get themselves around the table, which they're not allowed to do, obviously, to do the same. So, it's pretty much incumbent on associations like ours to try and identify the issues, get people around the table, and see if we can find solutions.
I think one of the challenges right off the bat was companies thought you just flicked a switch and magically went paperless, and everybody wanted to do it, and they assumed that it wasn't a big deal, and they didn't realize the state of how bad the standards were, how every company was different, how it was a dog's breakfast, how some people didn't even know what documents they were sending, so I applaud IBAO and the entire industry for building a framework to let us do it properly, to get all the processes in place. One of the motivating factors is obviously the company's trying to reduce expenses. Once phase 3 finishes up, how many companies are waiting to chomp at the bit to implement it immediately right after that fact?
And I love the fact, Jeff, that you pointed out that some companies thought you could flick a switch. Some actually did flick a switch. And there was a lack of understanding at the start, I believe, from some companies as to what the demand for digital print would actually be. So we've always had this challenge between what a consumer has told a broker and what an insurance company may think a consumer wants. And it can be different, and it can be conflicting. So, for example, quite often right at the get-go, we had heard that some insurance companies had targets for their consumers, the customers that they service, they were trying to get 80% penetration for consumers going digital, which, many of the brokers we spoke to were the complete opposite and said you'd be lucky if you got 20%. So it became pretty evident to us quite early on that we had to go out and ask the consumers themselves. But we have over, I think, Steve, 8,000 now from Ontario that have responded.
Yeah, Ontario's right around 8,000.
Yeah.
10,000 nationally.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, 53% of the consumers that have responded to that say they still want to get paper copies of their insurance documents. So one of the interesting aspects of this is not necessarily the 53, but there's an opportunity for 47 in there. So 47%, nearly half of consumers either want digital or whether they are open to going digital, which I think is a bit of an eye-opener for many of the participating insurance companies as to what is realistic.
Like, to me, it doesn't matter whether it's 10%, 20%, or 90% that want to do it. All the insurers want to save these stamps, and they're going to get us doing stuff. So isn't this really more importantly about, I mean, who cares how many want it? They're going to implement it. We have to establish what the rules of the game are for them, some guiding principles, so we're not jammed with 40 different ways of doing something.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of dynamics to this. So, you know, will insurance companies all evolve this direction? For sure. I don't see why they wouldn't. So if you're talking about the end game, then yeah, you're probably right. They're all going to do this. But at what time and how they do it is very different. And this is what we're trying to help figure out. So ideally, you want a broker in control because not every consumer has their own, all their insurance policies with one insurance company. So you don't want to explain to an insured, a customer of a broker, look, I know you've got 3 different insurance companies, maybe one for your business, one for your car, one for your toys. You've got to use 3 different apps to get access to your paperwork. That is just not good customer service. But having said that, there are definitely brokers out there that don't want to do things digitally or are quite happy for the insurance companies to do it. So, there's this hybrid of, how do you make sure that an insurance company understands what certain brokers want, whereas if they truly want to continue to service consumers digitally and the broker doesn't want to do it, how do they do it? So we're seeing the movement of insurance companies on when they do the rollout and how they do the rollout very different. And this is what we're trying to help them with, to understand how best to do it and how damaging it can be to an insurance broker's workflows if they don't follow certain rules as they roll these out.
Like I said, you talked about before, the idea of flipping on a switch. I think in some industries and service industries that can be done, right? It's easier when you control the whole servicing channel right end to end. In clearly the P&C broker channel, it's more complicated, and it's getting those parties in the ecosystem now to speak the same language, to talk together, to deliver this in a consistent fashion. And the guiding principles and best practices document is laid out to do just that, to lay out what's needed to support brokers who are going to look to provide that digital servicing themselves. And that can be a bit different than a broker who doesn't choose that, and a carrier who now offers a backup plan or an offering to provide that digital servicing. But all those pieces are considered in there. The guiding principle is that best practices to follow. Obviously, the exact how at the end of the day is going to be dependent on each carrier, and many have made some changes already to address that. But I think the goal is to have those best practices laid out so that there is a roadmap and a plan for people to follow consistently.
Because there's kind of an interesting point there that I want to tease out. It sounded to me like, Colin and Steve, you said that there are carriers who are going to be offering direct to them customer self-service. And I'm really interested in knowing what Jeff, Adam, and Steve think about that. Like, most of the way that I've been thinking about the Going Paperless is, how does the paper or the electronic paper go from the carrier to the broker to the customer to keep the customer close, keep the broker's customer close to them. If carriers start to introduce ways that the customer can go direct to them, seems to me it breaks that thought process. And I'm just really interested in hearing what Jeff, Adam, and Steve had to say about that.
I don't know. I'm getting this question sort of cold cocked, so the answer's got to be measured accordingly. But I can't think of a single other homogenized part of my life. Like, my closet doesn't have just one maker of clothes. My driveway doesn't have one maker of cars. On and on and on, go all the way through it. I don't have one set of skis, right? I have a couple different kinds. And even myself, I don't have one insurance company for all of my risks. I have different for life. I have different for auto. Auto and home are the same. My second car is different, and go dangling down there. And I don't think the client representation is any different. So it came up earlier in here around what does it look like for the customer journey to be scattered amongst those 4 apps, those 4 portals, those different passwords? Your advisor, if you have one in the broker sense of the word, like what good of a job can they do on it? I see why the insurance company wants to capture that data. I see why they want to try and build the brand affinity with it. It's just never going to reach that endpoint. So it's better than nothing, but I think it's very far from ideal in my world.
Let me weigh into this one, Tom. So the question here really is the broker in a position to be able to digitally serve their customers today? Some are yes, some are no, and some are not even interested. Okay. So what we're trying to do is help the ones that are no figure out how to go down the path to be able to do that. Those that are no may stay at no, they may shift, we don't know. And as we go through that, we impart on the insurance companies that that is the best solution for the customer to be serviced through the technology that is owned and managed by the broker. However, depending upon the insurance company's strategic plan, depending upon the broker's capability, there may need to be interim opportunities for consumers to be able to reach out and grab those documents. So some companies are a bit more proactive than others, and some are pushier than others. So some may reach out to the customer directly and say, hey, look, we've got the technology today. Others may say, well, we can put the technology in place today for consumers to access, and we're going to wait until later to give it to the brokers. And these are the companies we have the discussions with to say the priority should be with the brokers and getting the broker the technology and the data to be able to service their customers digitally as quickly as possible. At this particular point in time, we have not had any insurance company that has said that what we have stated is incorrect. So they all understand that that is the desire, but some of them are not willing to invest in that solution upfront before they do their own. And that's just the way it is. And that's just because we're coming at this down a path that has already been set for some of these companies for many years. And to try and get it to split or fork at a particular point on the road is not very easy.
And like Adam said, I agree with everything that Adam said, other than he said it's not ideal. I think, quite frankly, it's shit. If insurers are going to go down this road of, well, we're going to do it if you're not. I mean, the consumer has a choice between broker as well. If they're looking for a digital solution for their documents, let them choose one that has a choice. And for those that don't want, they can either pay for the stamps themselves or get a solution.
I agree with you, Steve. I'll just chime in. You guys kind of hit all the points, but I just want to make sure brokers have choice. And it should start with the broker solution first, and then I hear a number of carriers said, "Hey, we've went through the Go Paperless thing. We're giving you time to set it up, and if you don't set it up, we're going to launch direct to consumers." So brokers have had a year and a half now to do it. Now, have we had the perfect tools to do it right now? I'll talk about that second. No, we haven't. There's some real tech barriers, but we can do the job. So brokers need to have choice. And again, brokers don't do the choice, then if their carrier wants to do it, I feel that they did have a chance to do it. They didn't do it. And it'll be interesting to see what carriers, as Steve mentions, push costs down to us, how that factors in the future. I think the survey shows that half of Canada isn't ready for it. So to try and put a gun to our head and say you have to have 90% in 12 months is not the way to go about it, but you want to gradually increase it. What should stretch goals be? I'm really glad that survey is out there to say, hey, if we're going to turn on the switch, here's what we're going to try and work towards over a period of time. The communication has been very poor. So that's kind of where we have to move it is, hey, we've told you to set it up this way. Who's going to kind of be the watchdog to make sure these carriers are doing their job and the vendors? That's, I guess I throw it to Steve. Where are we at with this? And do you think in 12 months everybody will have it done? And do we need a watchdog to make sure they get it done so our life isn't a complete dog's breakfast?
A lot of good points. I want to add on to swearing Steve's point too, on the part about the companies. I would say and I think I try and separate the discussion into two pieces. We talked a couple times about obviously want to enable the brokers to provide the service and not have it to be direct to consumer or direct to consumer from a carrier as an only option. And I separate that from a drive potentially, as we talked about, to go only paperless, and let's cut out the paper. Because they're two pieces. One is enabling paperless. The other is how far do you try and force it. But from an enabling standpoint, from a positive perspective, when we started the Going Paperless initiative, there were a couple carriers that were going out and offering it. One of the first things we realized in the paperless was just some of the plumbing in getting those documents to the brokers had some issues that were preventing the brokers from being that option, really. And it was, documents are coming down for the most part through eDocs, but there's some nuanced pieces about how they're being sent and some of the use of those that needed to be enhanced and made more consistent. So that became a priority one, because without that, it's not even going to be an option to provide that servicing. Consistency is key. So we've got 7 carriers part of the initiative. They're making the necessary steps, but 7 we know is not enough. Even though we've got a good representation, even the size of the channel, there's a lot more out there. So this part now is get these recommendations out to the wider industry to start getting those adopted and move on to the second wave of recommendations being done now, which is all about how do we capture that customer's preference for document type, and how do now the carriers work with the brokers and their systems to capture that and reflect that.
Well, I think what Colin has and Steve have found with Going Paperless, which is a real practical application of the standards, there are structural things that are missing, and Colin hit the nail right in the head, is those that create the standards, CSIO, really are the only body that can actually police it, and it needs to be policed, because otherwise you end up with a dog's breakfast sitting on your collective doorsteps. It's creating the standards, making sure people, even if you get it right day one, by the time next week rolls around, something's changed, and it has to be updated and policed. But so Colin hit the nail right in the head there. I want to go back to something Steve said. You have 7 carriers. How does the average broker out there get a handle on what, if he looks at his portfolio, how does he get a handle on which of the carriers are actually doing the Going Paperless in the way that suits the broker, in a way that suits themselves, or just not doing it at all? How does the average broker figure out, are their carriers playing ball here or not?
So many brokers look to their associations for indications on what some of these trends are. Some just listen directly from their insurance carriers. Some are a hybrid. Some do industry press. So as we discussed, as the Going Paperless group, we do need to better communicate what has been done and what is available through all of those channels. Otherwise, you may not hear, or you may hear something that's not consistent. But going back to Steve's point, is really about broker choice. So what we do need to educate is the brokers need to ensure that they're asking their carriers for choice. A lot of the understanding of some of these issues doesn't emanate in clear communication to those that are making the investments. So you have to make sure that the insurance companies hear loud and clear what the expectations of the brokers are.
Who in your mind is going to be the biggest obstacle on this? Is it going to be time to delivery for brokers to get this solution there using the existing BMSs? Are they going to be the obstacle, or is it going to be the insurers?
I'll answer it from a slightly different perspective. Okay, that when I used to work in the insurance company side of things, one of the challenges was always trying to get brokers to move in a particular direction. When you talk to BMS providers, they quite often have a hard time trying to understand what their brokers really want and need to make the investments. And some are better at this than others, and some move faster than others. You then have to look at the dynamics of the tech vendors themselves and who owns them, who's investing in them, and how quickly are they likely to move, depending on the scale of the number of products that they have, the markets that they serve, and it gets very complicated very quickly. My view to answer your question, I think the biggest obstacle in all of this is the brokers, because trying to get a single voice on expectations and to actually create physical activity to make sure everybody understands those expectations is really challenging.
And what's physically possible in the broker network is entirely up to the capabilities that the BMSs will will provide us with for the money that we pay them.
And one thing on that, Steve, that we are doing at the moment, we've been in touch with the vendors on, again, from a going paperless perspective with the vendors to try and make it easier somewhat and understandable for the brokers, is working with the vendors to get a very, a simple info sheet of some sort. But the idea is to try and create a fairly simple to follow, concise, focused on this point specifically, cheat sheet or info sheet per BMS for brokers to kind of see, if you're on this system, here's what you can do. Here's what it enables you to do and how to do it. Hopefully that as well help provide some of the brokers who may not be as familiar with what their system can do.
There's a myriad of solutions out there. Like, obviously Truthful has announced this year they're offering their mobile app and their portal for free, depending on what preferences you want. I'm not sure, a lot of people will tend to pick the solution that goes right with their BMS that connects, but other people look at different solutions out there at this point. Is there any solution that's rising to the top right now?
I mean, from a going paperless perspective, it's really about enabling the broker to use their system of choice. And obviously the BMSs are the I would say the easier, but from an existing infrastructure, the eDocs is kind of the way today. So again, we look at different horizons on this from a short term, leveraging eDocs because most documents are being sent that way.
I got a question for everybody. I don't know if I'm allowed to add it. And Tom, you can cut it out later if you want, but what advice would you give to Joe Broker that's got no tech and he's right loving the mail? How does he go from zero to hero in the digital world? What are some advices to make that transition over a 12-month period? Or, I'd like to hear this group maybe share some brokers who are like, man, I need to do something, but where do I start? Love to hear some ideas.
The quick answer from my perspective is sell his business to one of the three of you guys.
I was waiting for that one.
It's kind of tongue in cheek, but I'll jump in. I was kind of thinking similar, and I'll say this as a non-buyer, as we've bought very little or near nothing, but I'm sitting here thinking, like, is it even possible, right, to fully catch up and piece, or do you need to find a bridge across, a helping hand, something?
Before I forget, a good website, www.ibao.org. Going Paperless. There's a bunch of resources there. So if you're on the journey to look for it, definitely look into that.
If you look at brokers who are more down the quote unquote digital path, ask any one of them what their tech stack looks like outside of their BMS. And they're all running stuff to get the job done that the BMS either doesn't do at all or does, but they check the box and they do a real shit job at it. So you got to buy something else. So Jeff, you've got robotic process automation going on. Adam, in addition to his BMS, he's probably got about 6 or 8 different things. I know I've got at least 4, whether it's lead management, like the list is really long. And that's because our BMSs have, like Colin said, sat on their laurels, and the demands of what we need to do in order to meet the needs of the consumer have outpaced that space entirely.
I think if we try and help the BMSs understand some of the core functionality that they need to improve to help your businesses, I think that would go a long way, because they have, although they've been resting on the laurels, they have a hard time as well trying to understand all the different business models that are out there that they service or try and service. So your natural sort of reaction is to get to the lowest common denominator, because if you can invest millions of dollars down a path and only 10 people are going to use it, why bother? So I think there's a lot that we can do and should do to try and help them down that path. And I know frustration has been building for quite a number of years. And then, this is one of the reasons when you got to ask yourself why there's not more competition in the BMS vendor network out there, is because it is so difficult to break into.
You said there was not a lot of competition in the BMS space. I'd actually argue that there's been quite a bit of competition in the BMS space. It's just come out of the core. It's come away from the core part of the business, right? There are lead management tools out there. There are client portal tools out there. There's all kinds of things that the modern broker needs or wants to use that the BMSs haven't done, right? So very few people have gone after the CSSIs or the applied epics or what have you, but they've gone very heavily into that space around that. And there's new solutions who's going after the core BMS market. There was Tech Canary, There is broker core. So there is actually, relative to 10, 15 years ago, actually there's quite a bit more competition. And I think that's because a number of smart folks have seen that there's this huge gap in what the BMSs provide, whether it's a Pathway or a TrueFlow or Newt or, any one of BrokerLift. I could probably, if I thought about it hard enough, name off 10 or 12 of them that are going after that space.
Sorry, very few of them are doing anything that one of the BMSs doesn't already do. They're just doing it well, right? Because all the BMSs are going, oh, we check that box. We do that. We do that. Yeah, we do that too. But you do none of it well.
I think you're seeing a push to openness. Like when Applied Systems said they're opening things up, becoming less like Apple and more like PC, that got my attention. So these guys can have a solution for everything because things are changing too quick. So they got to pick what they want to be good at and what they want to build and decide if they're going to do it or not. Just make sure that if they're not going to do something, let me pipe what I want in there and make it easy for me to push data from point A to point B and get the job done. I just don't like hitting barriers. I don't like getting a $35,000 bill to connect point A to point B because they're building some kind of bridge that doesn't need to be built. So I'd like to see things open, and we're seeing a trend towards that. So I think that's going to really shake things up. A couple things I would decide quickly if you're looking at going paperless is start educating your clients. If you haven't gone paperless, you need to start looking at a solution, but you have to get your clients ready for it, whether it's an e-blast, whether it's social media. Start explaining the benefits of paperless. And then you need to build a process in there in your system, make sure there's a spot to identify how the client wants to get paper. And some of the systems out there are not very good, or there's not many fields left to say, hey, I want text, I want email, I want mobile app. Make sure you be able to do that, and then make sure you ask your client. It's one thing to automatically assume people are that way and make them go paperless, but those people convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. So you got to be careful you're not making people do stuff and pushing them to somewhere they don't want to go. But likewise, when you write up a new client, make sure you add them immediately. Make sure they're added on. Don't optionally do it. Try and get them signed up immediately, all your new people, and then over a period of time, try and get your clients gradually moving over there and improve your processes. So this is some things that I would look at doing. I know we're trying to get more and more of our clients on paperless, but we're not forcing people to go paperless that don't want to do it.
If you feel that your BMS is holding your business back, what would you suggest that they need to do to try and propel your business forward?
Number one, I would say don't lose our data leakage. And again, I know it's gotten better, but I still have stuff that's missing when I go to requote it. I would like them to be able to requote my clients automatically. I've got a vendor, Applied Systems, that I pay 2 or 3 times the rating. I pay for the BMS, but it's not smart enough to requote it. Again, I can get my robotic process automation to do that for a price tag, and I probably will end up doing it, but why is that not coming in the box? Have an analytics module that that if you got consent from brokers that actually does stuff and give you intelligible information. One of the challenges, unfortunately, with all the BMSs is that the what's made them cool is you can build them the way you want, but everybody's built their own activities and built them their own way, so you can't take that data the same way because everybody's used different activities. So that's one of the challenges, but try and get it to a point where we can actually compare ourselves to our peers, but not pay an arm and a leg for it. And then continue to build connectivity. My mobile app solutions, they're okay, but I'd like to see things improve, build more functionality, allow me to do more things for my clients, let me automate more stuff so my staff can actually be speaking to consumers, having high value conversations.
I got to put an asterisk before my answer because I think we are a different looking brokerage. We sort of run differently. I don't know fully on different values or angles, but if they built a solution for us, I think it would be significantly underutilized by many. So I'm gonna preface this answer. I'll still give it with I don't know it's a smart use case, but if we were to say what we want or what I think is holding back other really competitive tech out there, is the access to quoting. There's one major player and sort of one minor player, maybe 1.5 minor players. So they are the gatekeeper on will a Nude Solutions be able to quote auto insurance or home insurance across. That's one big barrier. A second big barrier is the EDI download. So each one has built their own proprietary piece, locked it up, and kept it as an inclusive module inside. It's an incredibly powerful tool. You could point towards any other database, which leads me to my third one. All I really actually want is a wide open modern database that we can interact with. If you can give us a wide open modern database, we can do all the plumbing for all the other things that we want to do that's different from what Steve or Jeff wants to do. If you want to build an API interface to the entire thing, cool. But otherwise, if you don't want to do that, just unlock the damn database for us and let us have it in anything modern. And then we're able to go on.
I guess for me, it's on 2022 pricing, I don't want something that has the capabilities from '89. I think I deserve better than that. You know, like if it's going to be 1989 or 94, whatever it is, the version and the code, then charge me the pricing from then. Otherwise, give me the capabilities. I really shouldn't have to have this whole other tech stack of stuff that you actually do but aren't really doing well.
So, I mean, go back to my earlier point. I mean, as you can see, even just talking to the three brokers on the call here, we get three different viewpoints of the world based upon your own business environment. So if you can imagine wrapping in thousands of brokers, it must be incredibly difficult for any vendor working in our industry to try and make head or tail of these unless you start to group certain brokers and types of businesses together.
You're being really kind. I mean, we're not all that different when it comes to certain segments of what we do. There are things that I do, Adam does, and Jeff does, and even the broker without a BMS, well, maybe not the ones without a BMS, but that we do, well, yeah, even the ones without a BMS. What do? We're keying stuff in portals. What do? We do accounting steps. There are all these little things. We all want to know when the next payment is coming out and how much it'll be. All of us want that. Just little things that really make sense for everybody.
Let me tack on to what Steve said there too. I mean, BMS vendors are software vendors, tech vendors, no different than any other industry. Well, there's many other industries that have software vendors that have figured this out. This isn't a unique challenge to the BMS vendors to figure out what their diverse base of customers want, right? Every other software vendor has this challenge, but many of them figure it out.
I think one of the good things that we're seeing now is we've now got brokers driving the business case and communicating that to CZO where the companies are and starting it there and discussing it first, then going to the vendors as opposed to vendors bringing it to us. We're part of the solution. It's done with us, not to us. So that's a huge shift because we got to build the rules of the road because we got people sending bad data. They're sending it the bad ways. There's no consistency. We get that all cleaned up. Back to Adam's point about having that system that can take the data and bolt stuff on. We can move it around a lot better and we can reduce that friction. So that's encouraging where things are going. And, again, everybody's got a little different vision. Our independence is our greatest strength, but also our greatest weakness because everybody's at a different stage of the stairs, at a different stage. We're not at the same point, but if we can jump into some projects together and get caught up together and move together, it's amazing what we can do, right? So that's what's starting to happen. And the brokers are actually starting to drive the business cases now, which is a huge shift. And we're going to start seeing more and more of that. Like Go Paperless, the brokers led that initiative, brought the companies and vendors to the table. That's a huge success, I think. That's the way to do it.
I totally agree. And the Going Paperless project was key to actually getting back to some of that basic information. So what is in a file? What is in an eDoc? Where is it going? And that's all we were trying to do to make sure, as Steve was saying, find the commonality across all the business units. And can we do it consistently? And then we can all at least get on a platform that we can move from.
Is retention important to your brokerage? Of course it is. That's why at IFS, we have a cancellation prevention process. Want more details? Give us a call. I know you don't always use a premium finance company, but when you do, you should use IFS. Cheers.